Hey folks, welcome to episode 107 of WP Roundtable. My name is Kyle, doing WordPress stuff here in Jackson, Michigan, and I've got a great guest with us here today. I am the only one who was able to make it, but I'm really excited that Christie Chirinos could join us for the show. Christie, thanks for coming on.
Yeah, I'm really excited to be here.
That's great. I am pretty stoked about our discussion because I've gotten to know you just a little bit and some of the things that you're involved in, and it's exciting. I think you're doing some cool things and have a lot of good stuff to share. So this is going to be a fun discussion. So before we dive into learning all about you, Christie, we're going to talk about our quick picks of the week real fast. And my quick pick is a blog post that I just came across that I really found engaging, just particularly for me. I like doing development, but I'm totally guilty of poor man's namespacing. It's a PHP thing. And so this article from Elaine Schlesser, which I'll share a link to, kind of breaks down the noob mistakes that folks like myself are guilty of abusing PHP classes as cheap namespacing or prefixing functions. Simple little developer mistakes. We think we're so hot and using object-oriented programming, and we're really not. This is a good thing to get us all on the same page. Christie, do you have anything that you want to share with us today?
I totally do. And unfortunately, it's a bit of shameless self-promotion, but certainly my favorite thing that I read this past week was Torque magazine did us the incredible role of talking about our merge that's going on between Ingot and Caldera WP. And so that's something that I would love to share with you. How do I share it with you?
I'll find it. Don't worry about it. Great. I will post a link to that on our event page, and we will encourage everybody to read it. So let's learn a little bit about you, Christie. Why don't you take us back a little bit, and we're gonna wander the path to get to where we are today, and all the interesting things that you're working on. But long before all of this, when you were younger, before you had any kind of a career, what were the things that you aspired to do?
That's funny. That's a great question. So how much younger are we talking?
Old
Right?
enough to have some kind of an ambition, like this is what I want to do with my life.
Old enough to have an ambition. I think the first thing I wanted to do was I wanted to be a musician. Which I actually find now is a recurring thing among other people in my career, which is really funny. Maybe that has to do with just all of us wanting to be rock stars, or maybe that has to do with musicians end up gravitating towards WordPress. But whichever one of those is, I think the first thing I wanted to be was a musician. But see, there's two kinds of parents in this world. There's the ones that say, yeah, we're going to support you, and there's the ones that are like, no, get a real career. So mine were in the second camp. And another thing that interested me was a lot of the things that all of us experienced in 2008. With the most dramatic recession in United States history ever, worse than the Great Depression. And that led to me studying a career in economics, particularly because I was interested in the way that people got out of poverty. So this is kind of like a strange thing, like an 18-year-old going to college. What do you want to do with your life? Well, I want to solve the problem of poverty. Okay. Um, and uh, and I started out there. After I didn't want to be a musician anymore, I wanted to be a public policy economist, and and that carried on for a while, until the more that you study that kind of very academic field, the more you realize that all kinds of very intelligent people with all kinds of PhDs and all kinds of really great opinions, are researching and publishing things all the time. But in the end, not a lot of it gets used. And I wanted something that was more hands-on and less research-oriented. And I stumbled around in my formal studies in that way. I worked as a part-time bank teller, and over my job as a part-time bank teller, I met a lot of very low-income people and a lot of students who didn't know anything about their banking, right? Which is actually a really common thing, right? I had moms who came in with their 2 kids and they didn't know the difference between the credit card in their wallet and the debit card in their wallet. They thought they were the same thing. And then they would come to the bank and say, oh my gosh, I don't understand. Why did I get a bill for spending my money? Well, that's not what happened, but that's what they thought. And so many stories like that. And that was sort of my foray into becoming an entrepreneur, which is weird for me still to think that was it. But I think that a lot of entrepreneurship comes from having an experience that you identify no one is trying to solve. At least not in the way that you think would be most effective, not in the way that you could do it. And so that's how one ends up starting their own thing. And that led to me in college creating an educational program for college students about personal finance. So it was an in-person thing. We would, instead of doing lectures, we ran games. Yeah. I can't hear you. I don't know if you turned off your audio.
Yeah, there's some loud cars driving by outside on the street, so I muted myself. But carry on. It's fascinating.
Okay, I'm sure. And yeah, so instead of workshops, we did games. And instead of classes and lectures, we did carnivals, right? And I recruited people and the local credit unions and the Student Financial Services Office to sort of put together these educational events and games and carnivals about banking. And I remember then at that point, I had professors coming up to me and start talking to me about words that I, as a theoretical economics student, had never heard before, such as scalability and startup and whatever. And I'm like, what? I'm just trying to teach kids personal finance, right? And that is sort of what steered me in the direction of a technology career. And at that point, I started working on, I guess now what we would call a minimum viable product for a technology-based version of these in-person carnivals and games and things like that I had executed at my university. So that was my foray into this field. So to wrap my hands that this concept of a technology startup and what that entails, I ended up attending one of those startup weekend events. Right. Signed up for one of those, showed up to sort of workshop my idea to understand what this different group was talking about. And that's actually where I met Josh. And he was there to sort of do a similar thing, to meet other people in the community, to workshop his thoughts about his business, and just to connect and maybe to eat some free food. And right. and see who else was in a similar mindset. So that's how we met. And from there, we started working on a handful of different ideas together, stay connected after the event. And he's the one who dragged me into the WordPress world, right? It was like, you should come to WordCamp. You should throw up your website for your financial education on WordPress. You should do this, this, and that, and try these things out. So while all of that was going on, I was finishing up my MBA, which I finished last year, with a focus on information system management. So I dove really right in. And Josh and I started working on Ingot, which Ingot is a WordPress plugin that automates A/B testing. So something that I had done a lot of, learned a lot of in terms of marketing classes during my program, and that Josh had written a lot about, and we saw a need for it. And we started working on Ingot. It was fun and enjoyable, and I started attending WordCamps through that, met a lot of people in the community, loved the people. But like I said, before we went on the air, I think the moment in which WordPress, the community, really clicked for me was when I attended one of those contributor day events and really saw the kind of volunteer power that comes into the WordPress mission. And that's when it clicked that, yeah, absolutely, this is something that I really want to do. Forward to a few months, and Josh and I and David and our other partner, who has now stepped down, start working together on bringing work, as well as Caldera Forms and the other Caldera WP plugins into one cohesive entity that's dividing the work right and using everyone's talents right. And that's where we are now. That was long. I'm sorry.
Oh, that's great. That really brings us up to speed now. So you've referred to Josh. That's you're speaking of Josh Pollock, who is a colleague of yours now and a friend of ours. He was on our show back in episode 81 last November. That was before we all met, I think, for the first time this past December in Philadelphia for WordCamp.
Yeah.
So help us understand a little bit about the breakdown of responsibilities and what sort of things you in particular do day to day.
So day to day, with our new upcoming entity, which is Caldera Labs, we've divided the responsibilities into where I'm playing a role of business manager, and leading the marketing to the best of our abilities. But that's a cohesive group effort at this point, where really working where he loves most and is best, which is in the role of lead developer, and not having to take care of some of the responsibilities that maybe he doesn't love, like bookkeeping, and other such things that have to do with running a business. And David Kramer, who is a brilliant developer, and being able to take David off of things he doesn't enjoy, like support, and have David on things that he really enjoys, like developing new products, lets us have a situation where all of us are doing what we're best at, and together we hopefully form some kind of synergy and something good happens from the things that we've been doing. So
That's pretty exciting. If you had to sum up, if you could, what it is that you're trying to accomplish here at Caldera Labs, the umbrella entity that consists of a number of products that are growing in popularity. What's really the essence of this particular plugin business?
Of Caldera Labs, at the very, very top, the top of the umbrella, all of us are sort of very social good oriented people. And we see Caldera Labs as an opportunity to use our skills and technology to give people tools that make the internet, and this is our slogan on the site, is more powerful, more accessible, maybe even fun. So we're working to have things that are useful, but that are also important, that are giving people things that weren't there before to be able to express their ideas at the top levels of expression, right? So, for example, with Ingot, what I used to tell people very often was large companies are A/B testing when they have the resources, because the tools that we have for A/B testing require high amounts of traffic, require high amounts of resource investment. But if you want to stand out in an extremely competitive online marketplace, you have to test your website's content. There's no option but to do that. But the systems that we have right now make that extremely useful tool available to a small percentage of businesses. So how can we make that extremely useful tool available to larger percentages of online merchants? I think that's a driving force behind all of the products of Inga, Caldera, WP, our independent freelancing work that is all now coming together under Caldera Labs. And a big part of it also is we want to like our lives. We want, no, seriously, right? We want to make things that we believe in, that we have seen other people need. I love getting a message as I've been working with Josh that is from a customer, and it says, "You guys are doing a great job. Thank you so much. This is awesome." Right? You've solved someone's problem. You've made someone's life easier.
Mhm.
And that's a lot more enjoyable than the other jobs that were available to me as an MBA grad.
Well, I'm fascinated by that a little bit. So maybe, for those of us not so experienced in that realm, shed some light on that. Break that down a little bit. What other opportunities, could you have seen yourself pursuing that are different, that there's a definite contrast, and that you reflect on and appreciate where you are versus where you very likely could have ended up given the path you were on? I don't know if that makes sense, the question.
Sure. Yeah, it does make sense, the question. And honestly, I do think that there is benefit and beauty and necessity in any path that you might end up in. But with me personally, I know myself and I know that I'm a hands-on person. I know that I'm happier making rather than what's the word I'm looking for? Maybe organizing, or maybe managing, or maybe supervising, or maybe, no, let's go with that. Organizing, supervising. No, seriously. and and I'm someone who enjoys seeing the product of my work, right? So perhaps as an economist, um, I would have seen the product of my work in terms of research published, in terms of recommendations made, but I wouldn't have seen the direct impact on someone's life. When I get a message on a contact form from Caldera Labs and it says, "Hey guys, I bought Caldera Forms and it's awesome, and I was wondering if you can help me use Caldera Forms to do X, Y, and Z, to set up a membership site, to do payment processing, to do some kind of thing that we hadn't thought of." And that's a one-to-one contact with someone that is having an impact for something that I'm doing. And then we say, yeah, actually, we can make that happen. That's something that I wouldn't have gotten in perhaps a more traditional business career, whether in finance, just the track in which I was going towards, or more traditional economics, just my original path. Does that answer the question?
Yeah. Yeah. That's great. That's great. Yeah. You, in a lot of ways, you have a different background than many of the people I interact with in this community, but similar in some ways. I completely agree with you that a lot of us in the background have a musical background in this industry. That's been surprising to me.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I don't know what to make of it. But I don't interact with that many people who have an MBA. doing what I would say. If I looked at the 100 other people that we've interviewed on the show, there's probably 2 or 3 who have an MBA. So, what your formal business education? How does that play into the work that you do? How do you think it affects you as the business leader for this organization, and what do you see that's different about the way you approach things versus everyone else in the industry who, for the most part, doesn't have that?
I will say that I don't think a business education is essential to running a business. I will say that. A lot of the people that I've met in the community are incredible business people, not because they have a formal business education, but because they spent a lot of time researching their product, learning about how to create their product, talking to people that use their product, and all of the stuff that we've created, the science of management stuff for, they figured out, right? And that's why it's the science of management. So I will say that the things that we do are not that much more different. They're just more streamlined. Um, and there's nothing wrong about that, or right. We have names for things that other people without a formal business education are doing anyway. Maybe with Caldera Labs, the way that we're reorganizing, we're using words like we're merging, we're using words like we're investing in research and development, we are using words like we're dividing the labor appropriately and intelligently and efficiently and attempting to create synergy between the team members. But all of those things are things that people in the community that I would speak to at WordCamps all understand, which is we're trying to work smart. We're trying to create things that are useful, and we're trying to do it in a way where it's enjoyable and it's profitable.
You've talked about pursuing venture capital and things like that. Is it necessary in your situation? How does that play into your business strategy? Those kinds of things, alternative ways of raising funding or accelerating a business's growth, and how important is it that you have that vocabulary?
Sure. I'm a big believer that your first round of venture capital is your revenue. This idea that venture capital, we're going to raise money for our company, there isn't, maybe there is, but there isn't a great investor who's also going to be a mentor and a partner in the growth of your business that wants to invest in you if you haven't already proved yourself. If you've proved yourself, you don't have to know the vocabulary and the jargon and whatever else you might think of as being proficient in that sphere, because you've proven that you understand what's key, which is your product, how to make it efficiently, how to get it to the people who need it, how to uncover more needs with that product, right? How to make, as they would say, evangelists and repeat customers of those first customers. And once you've demonstrated that kind of competency with your revenue and the profit that you're turning in, I also don't think that being particularly versed in the vocabulary and the world, I guess, would be the umbrella term of venture capital. It's something that's going to come to you because you're already showing that you're a worthwhile investment.
I hear that you're going to be giving your first WordCamp presentation coming up here soon. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I'm really excited about that. So first of all, it's a wildlife where your first WordCamp presentation is at the United Nations headquarters of the United States of America. That is totally nerve-wracking, but it's also exciting, and it's definitely a huge honor. But yeah, it'll be Sunday, July 17th at 10 a.m. And I'll actually be talking about A/B testing. As I mentioned, I think my first big girl step into the WordPress space was Ingot and the automatic A/B testing plugin. And so my first WordCamp talk is going to be about how you can use A/B testing to increase your sales, increase your conversions, grow your mailing list. and why you should be using A/B testing, and some case studies on how other people have used it with effective results, and what not to do when you A/B test. So it'll be a fun and it'll be a good one, and hopefully it'll give people information about how you can make your site work for you, maybe a little bit smarter. Yeah.
That's amazing. It looks like a really good topic, and you should have a full room with a 2-track event, New York City. I wish I could be there at the United Nations. That's unbelievable. Very
Yeah.
exciting. Have you given presentations like this one in the past for audiences?
Not at the United Nations, no. That's definitely a different thing. I've presented to an audience for an extended period of time for whatever other reason, probably in school, but not quite like this. So I'm pretty excited. I would be lying if I told you that I wasn't nervous, but that's normal, right?
Absolutely. It doesn't matter how many you do. And you should still get nervous. And this is a big stage to be on for your first WordPress talk.
Yeah, definitely.
Definitely, that's high profile, and hopefully it won't be your last. Love to see a lot
I
more.
don't think it will be my last.
Yeah. What are you doing to prepare your presentation?
I think I probably start with what do I want someone to feel when I'm done, right?
Good start.
And I actually mean that when I say feel, not be thinking about, but feel. Do I want them to feel really inspired? Do I want them to feel gushy about changing the world, or do I want them to feel like I've just given them a toolkit to double their sales in the next 2 weeks? Um, or do I want them to feel that urgency, that why aren't you testing your site right now? How has this escaped you? Um, and I haven't made up my mind yet about how I want to make you feel once you're done listening. But once I decide that, it'll help me gear how I'm going to deliver the points that I've already fleshed out in my head, which I'm telling you is why you should be A/B testing. What is A/B testing? What are some examples of the people that A/B test? And what are some proven successes, proven failures, and how can you recreate those, right? But that's dry stuff, like, okay, boo. But how you want someone to feel when you're done is going to guide how you're going to deliver that very sort of rigid structure. Why should you be doing this? What is it? What are some examples? Best practices, poor practices.
Do you mind sharing with us some great examples of maybe success stories with A/B testing that you think really illustrate the significance? I love, because data is a big thing for me, and I love making presentations to clients and others. I love stories where a hypothesis is suggested and a test proves critical in determining the truth, the facts, and influencing an important decision. Do you have any good
Right.
stories for that?
I actually have a personal story with that. Well, not personal to me, but an example of somebody I know that effectively used Ingot. So here in New York City last fall, I was spending a lot of my time at a co-working space in Chelsea in Manhattan called the Center for Social Innovation. And as I've mentioned to you, I think a lot of my background is like a gushy, change the world sort of person. And I found a co-working space in New York. As they say, the city has something for everybody. That's a co-working space of gushy, change the world people. And one of the programs that they do is this program called the Agents of Change. And it's an accelerator program like many co-working spaces have, but especially oriented towards people who have ideas to tackle social problems, as opposed to ideas that maybe solve a problem, but not a problem of things like income inequality, environmental protection, so on and so forth. So they had a site that they threw up, right? And it explained what the Agents of Change program was. And then they had a button. And the button said, apply for the Agents of Change program here. And they were running a WordPress site for this. And they actually used Ingot to test that button, right? And so what they did was they had a button that had a color which wasn't in line with their branding. I think it was like a purple or something. And then they had a button that was completely in line with their branding, which is a white, orange sort of thing that has to do with the organization. And they were trying to see what had more clicks according to the traffic, right? And so they would find that the stark contrast had a considerably higher percentage rate of clicks.
Wow.
And so these are things that I think you and I might never think about unless you have this experience where you actually see it work, and then you're like, oh, okay, well, let me think about the color of this button on my information page for my accelerator program application. And that's really powerful. And it's in those small details that make a difference between a good e-commerce site and a really effective e-commerce site.
Wow. All right. So you've talked a little bit about social impact, WordPress and open source, and how it's been something that has really struck you, particularly in recent times, and it's something you're growing quite passionate about. So maybe introduce us to this topic if you could.
Yeah, sure. I sort of alluded to it, but that is something that I'm becoming very interested in as the days pass. Which really, as I said, I think the moment in which WordPress really clicked for me was at that contributor day where I learned about the open source origins of WordPress, and I listened to people speak about how your volunteers' contributions to WordPress core make this incredible thing available to anyone to put their voices online, to enable them to start their own businesses, to give access to technology to communities that don't have as much access to technology. And as a former theoretical economist, those are the things that we love, right? Those are the trump cards to every model. Well, how do we solve this economic problem? More access to technology, more education, more economic opportunities. How do we create those? We don't know. And that's very powerful. It really is. And we hear our politicians talking about it. We hear our peers talking about it. Oh, more jobs, more opportunities. But the things that are creating those things in a tangible way can be really tough to point out. But then you have things like WordPress that are explicitly taking on that mission, and there's groups that agree, right? So the reason that WordCamp New York City this July is at the United Nations is because part of this bigger open innovation initiative that's being endorsed by the United Nations called Open Camps. So WordCamp is just one of the many camps that are going on over the span of what are the days? From July 8th to July 17th, so I'll be there on the last day, that are encompassing everything from Android, Hack for Humanity, educational technology that is open source, so on and so forth, to make these things accessible to people, not just in North America, but all around the world, because that's actually how you can make a considerable difference when people have access to these technologies. Yeah, did that address it?
Yeah, it's a fascinating topic, and it's a big thing. You know, WordPress is a big part of the open source world. It really is. Although it's a big world, it definitely is. There's a lot that goes on, and I'm interested in learning more about this open camp taking place at the UN, some of the other things that are going on there before WordCamp. It sounds like such an awesome 11 days or something like
Something
that.
like that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
and I mean, I'm probably going to make some kind of effort to see if I can attend any of the other ones that are going on for that extended period of time. But it's definitely an important validation to people who are working in WordPress and to people working in this open source movement, volunteering their time and their talents. They're very expensive and in demand talents right now, to making these kinds of technologies available, because you have authority groups like the United Nations saying, yeah, this is definitely a way in which we can solve a lot of problems. That's pretty powerful.
oh yeah, you're absolutely right. It puts platforms like WordPress on such a big stage.
Mhm.
I'm kind of blown away by that. Just the heights to which it's risen in recent times, and I only wonder where things are going to go next. What do you think? Where are things going?
Um, I think they're growing. I think that we're going to find ourselves in a radically different world when we're our parents' age. And that's exciting. It's also terrifying. I'm sure that we're going to see a lot of changes. I'm sure that a lot of changes are going to scare a lot of people. And that's just the nature of how these things are. But I think we have the resources and the capacity to direct most of those changes towards good.
So you've been around the WordPress space for a little while now, and you've been immersing yourself in it pretty quickly. Attended some camps. You've partnered at a pretty high profile business in the community. What are some of the things that kind of frustrate you about this space?
I think it's too early for me to answer that question,
Is it
right?
really? Ah.
Right? I can't do that yet. I have to get the space to love me first before I start tearing it down.
You could, I'm sure
I'm
you
just
could be
I'm just
very
kidding.
tactful with your critiques and commentary.
I'm just kidding. To be honest, and I'm being completely honest, I'm not going off of what I just said. I have really loved every single person I've met so far. I'm finding this community to be really genuine, really passionate, to just be people who love what they do, believe in what they're doing. I haven't met anyone at WordCamp that might express themselves in the way that some others at other conferences that I've been to in my career might. Something along the lines of, "Oh, my company sent me here." And that's really powerful. That's a powerful observation, because you don't meet people like that. And who you do meet is even more important, because you meet people who love to talk about what they're working on, what they're working on next, what the next opportunities might be, how their work contributes to the larger community, and that's really great. Um, if there's any criticism that I can see so far, it's that I find that it's very easy for people in the WordPress community to not think outside of the WordPress community, right? So WordPress is used by people of all kinds of different backgrounds. A lot of them would never even think that there's such a thing as a WordPress community. They're not like, I'm setting up a blog on WordPress.com. I'm part of the WordPress community now. They have no idea. And those people have needs. Those people have ideas need to get out there, and those people have money to spend. And that's something that we need to think about as WordPress continues to grow. It's pretty big, but definitely I've met some people that I've worked with, collaborated with some people of the WordPress communities and thinking about, right? The end user of a WordPress site that literally pays someone else to edit his posts for him, right? But that's real, right? And we're not thinking about that. Um, and so, as coming in from a sort of very formal business background, but tapping into the WordPress space, really loving it, seeing myself contributing to it, seeing the incredible progress that Josh and David have had over the past year with their incredible plugins and getting to be a part of that. I'm learning about your space. I'm working on my PHPs, like my advanced PHP skills.
Wow.
Well, you know, we all have to know what we're talking about, and certainly, I think that there's a really big opportunity to think about those end users that we're not thinking about when we're building complex WordPress things. There was a conversation that I had with Josh where he and I are talking about a client who has a really fantastic project, and Josh said something along the lines of, well, I don't know, he could go here, he could go there, he could go there. And I say to him, Josh, you forget that the average business owner is dying for one single reliable developer client relationship. No, because when you're surrounded by developers, you think that developers are everywhere. But when you're surrounded by 300 social entrepreneurs, and among them you have about 4 very proficient advanced developers, you realize that that's not necessarily the case.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Yeah, that's quite a powerful observation. And I would wonder if, because I've heard people say that before, and I'm sure, you know, I'm among the guilty. How are we really guilty of not getting outside of the WordPress bubble, at least relative to other industries, keeping in mind that the WordPress bubble is pretty huge compared to other platforms? WordPress dwarfs all of them by far. There's hardly even a runner up after WordPress
Right.
in terms of size and market share and adoption. Are we really bad about getting outside of the bubble, and is it hurting us a lot?
I was about to say, it's something that I've noticed, but I don't think it's any worse than any other industry I've dealt with. And I think that's just the nature of how we are as people, right? We find our interests, and we delve really deep into it, and then we have a hard time conceptualizing not knowing what we know. I think that's pretty normal. I don't think WordPress does it to any point that is worse than the people that I know who are currently working in corporate finance, than the people that I know that are currently working running volunteer camps in Rwanda, right? They think that everyone is running a volunteer camp in Rwanda. And that's something that we all do, but especially with WordPress, when we talk a lot about growth, when we talk a lot about maintaining that market leader status, that's the space where we can be really different.
I like that. And you're absolutely right that it is kind of just a human condition. You know, as they say, when the only tool you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. And you know, it's very persistent in the WordPress space, but things have changed. You know, I've been working with WordPress for a few years and been kind of involved in the community ever since. And when I started, it didn't have the market dominance that it does now. And conversations about web projects were a lot more about what's the right tool for this project. It could be WordPress, could be something else, could be Magento, could be some custom bespoke solution, could be SharePoint for all, you know, anybody. But today, there's a lot more well-respected people just using WordPress for everything.
Right.
No matter what. Let's just, WordPress can do everything now.
Right.
So it's gotten weird.
That must have been a really incredible transition to witness, right? Because I have come in at a point where WordPress can do everything. I mean, no, that's not true, right? I probably had a WordPress blog when I was like 12. But no, you know what I mean. But I have come into WordPress professionally at a point where I can do everything. And that's really amazing. But the more that it can do, the more potential markets there are. And I think that's where, for this space particularly, it's really important to ask lots of questions, stay really curious, stay really open, and uncover more and more and more. I think there's more layers.
Awesome. For younger Christie, what kind of recommendations do you have? If you could go back in time and give yourself a little bit of advice, just a few years.
Whoa. Oh. I think that the advice I would give myself would be break up with that boyfriend of yours. Because when you're young, you need to learn about everything you possibly can, because you don't know where you're going to end up. And that, you see that as compatible with a long-term relationship? I don't know. But maybe that's it. Maybe that's a terrible thing to say.
No.
Maybe I can remove that comment and maybe I can just say it. But see, but then it's cliche. No, it's funnier if I say break up with that boyfriend of yours. That's my recommendation to every person in their late teens. Break up with that boyfriend of yours and figure out who you are and figure out what you want to do. Or don't figure it out, because chances are you're not going to figure it out. But explore absolutely everything. Go to college in a different state if you can afford it.
Wow.
Consider doing things that are unconventional, like maybe not going to college and doing something else. Right?
Yeah.
I think that's what I'm getting to.
That's really powerful. That's really powerful. And I like that. There's some really good stuff in there.
Is there?
I mean,
fish it out.
the truth is, in my wandering path, I discovered things that I fell in love with that I didn't know exist, and at a time didn't even believe they could exist.
Right.
Like the community that we're involved in, for example, is a good example, or the culture of this industry, this part of the industry that we're in. I go to events and there's people who are direct competitors of each other, helping each other to succeed. In my time in college and working in other industries, was jaded and didn't believe that such a thing could even exist. And so when I stumbled across it, finding people who approached strangers with a "how can I help you" attitude versus "how can I get something out of you," it was such a breath of fresh air, and it just blew my mind. Like, I didn't know such a thing was out there in the real world. So it was very changing. And now, whether I stay with WordPress or not, or whether WordPress, carries on to the distant future, at least I know that this sort of a thing can exist. And I'm always going to align myself with communities in this way that are collaborative and not competitive, and believe that the rising tide raises all boats, and just happy, fun rainbows and stuff like that. It's, it's real.
Absolutely. That's really powerful.
Yeah. You don't know what's out there until you go and find it for yourself. So that's what I extract from your words of wisdom.
Right. Yeah, there you go. So the boyfriend in this piece of advice is whatever you're totally convinced of is the thing that is true and that is going to make you happy, and that must be true. Like, people aren't collaborative, or whatever it might be. Let it go, because it might be that you find something else, right? Like, maybe that's what it is. I don't know. We're philosophizing over here. That's not a word.
I love it. That's so great. So what sort of things are on your calendar where someone might bump into you in real life, other than at the UN on July 17th?
Woof. So I'm also going to be at WordCamp Boston. So you may bump into me in real life over there. And probably at a couple of more upcoming WordCamps around the East Coast. Other than that, outside of WordPress, where you may bump into me in real life, is if you ever find yourself in Downton, Manhattan, because I never leave. It's an ongoing joke with me just because I live here and work 4 blocks away from my apartment, which is weird. Um, but and then I live in this extremely dense, in terms of population, area. So in the 4 blocks between my apartment and my job, there's a grocery store, a gym, uh, and
Yeah.
everything else that other people usually have in a range of a handful of miles. So there's like a specific corner of the world in which you'd find me in real life. But in all seriousness, I will be at WordCamp New York City, as well as WordCamp Boston, a couple of the other events coming up along the East Coast. Um, and non-WordPress related, um, I don't know.
Cool. So we're getting down to the end of our time here, but before we go, I'd love for you to kind of give us a little glimpse into what is on the roadmap for Caldera Labs. What should we get excited about coming from you guys?
There is so much to get excited about. So our next release is Caldera members. So I used an example of somebody coming to us and saying, well, how can I use Caldera Forms for a membership site? Well, now you can. Or at least you will be starting next week. And that's something to get excited about. It's our immediate next milestone on the roadmap. But outside of that, and the Torque article, that was what I wanted to share with you and your audience at the beginning of this, sort of outlines a lot of that. You won't see a lot of the big roadmap things that are on the line for us. You're not going to, our customers aren't going to feel us consolidating our bank accounts and other things like that. But those are the things that are in line for us. And then after that, we're working on a ton of new projects. One of them is considerable improvements to Ingot to make it more useful, to add more features, to be able to A/B test more things, as well as Caldera Forms, to make the user experience of it even better, even more intuitive, even more simple, which is what we believe makes that product really stand out. And we also are engaging in a very dedicated and serious program to put out educational materials. More specifically, Josh and David are very informative, great educators when it comes to how to make WordPress plugins. Josh, in his words, literally wrote the book on the WordPress REST API, and um, and so we're going to be engaging in a lot of opportunities for people to learn from him and learn from a couple of people that we've collaborated with through formal education events and videos online. So that's something that we have cooking on the stove right now, and we're pretty excited to get it out there because, like I say, a lot of what we're doing just has to do with getting more people to have more access and more power with what they're doing.
It's amazing. I'm really excited about all the stuff you guys are coming up with. I know Josh has always had a history of producing high quality, top notch stuff, and you guys collectively as a team seem to be really making waves. It's cool. It's cool.
Thanks.
Excited
That's
to.
awesome that you're saying that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I believe it. I believe you guys are doing great stuff. You're producing cool things, and you guys have a bright future. So, hurrah, and keep at it. Well, I guess before you go, do you have any great recommendations for people that I should invite in the future as guests on the show?
For the future guests on the show, hmm. Have you? There's a couple of WordPress New Yorkers that I think are really great, like Vola Feldman from Freemius. I imagine you might have already had him on the show. Um,
Yes.
I'm only getting to meet people now, so you're really putting me on the spot, right? But certainly our other partner in Caldera Labs, David Kramer. If you haven't had him already on, you have. Yeah, maybe ask me this in 6 months, and I'll be able to give you a hidden gem.
Okay. Sure. Next time I bump into you at a WordCamp, which I hope isn't too far out, yeah, you can give me some new names. That'll be great. And I appreciate those recommendations. And for now, before we sign off, is there anything final that you want to share or promote or recommend to people before we head on our way?
Sure. I mean, I just wanted to say thank you so much for having me on. This was a really great experience, and it's really great validation for me coming in to the Caldera team, to hear you say, this is a really big thing you guys are doing. You guys are doing great. Like I kept saying, it's about listening to people, and listening to that is really awesome.
Well,
And
you
I
guys,
would love to recommend everybody, if you can, come to WordCamp New York, July 16th to 17th at the United Nations headquarters. That's definitely going to be an incredible thing to experience, to see WordPress alongside this lineup, of something that such an authority is saying, yeah, absolutely, this is something that can take us to the next place to be. That's awesome.
that's powerful. Absolutely. I think that's a great event that I wish I could attend. I think my business partner is probably going to attend, so I'll make sure he says hello. And I do wish all of you the best. Caldera Labs is going somewhere. They're doing great things. You guys have done a good job, not just creating great things, but also have such a good reputation in the community. And in this space, that means a lot. That's a really big deal to not just stay at home and try and produce good works, but to get out there and be visible and interact with people, with your customers, with the community, get to know the problems that people are solving, and build that good reputation. So keeping on, and pretty much that's our episode. So thanks everybody for watching, and thanks Christy for joining me tonight.
Thank you.